gallery. And I'm really, really thrilled to open John Shen's show after Image. And we have the privilege of hearing this conversation between John and Laurel Nakadate, who you'll learn more about the relationship, but was his professor and his mentor, and is the reason I know John. So the three of us met here at the gallery several years ago, and things have just evolved since then. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are having the reception right after this, so if you've been here before for a talk, you'll know we're just gonna have to pick up the chairs and fold them, bring them to a staff member so we can clear the space. And we can help you with that, so that's not a problem at all. And this video, or this talk is being recorded, so, but it's not live. So it will be also available on our website after this. And we'll hopefully have some time after for some Q&A, so think up some questions as you listen to this conversation. But thank you so much to Laurel, and over to you.
Awesome. I kind of want to unpack like how we ended up here, and I want to rewind a couple of years. So go back to 2019. We met because I was your teacher at Visiting.
Yeah.
For like 1 year I taught there.
Senior year, yeah.
Senior year.
Right before the pandemic.
So I go in to teach senior thesis, which I was assigned to teach like by accident the day before school started. Totally fine. And I go in, and then there's the John Shen in my class. And so I've got this like fully formed artist in my senior thesis, totally great. And then I find out that he's also, a double major in painting, right? And I then find out that he's just gonna work the whole semester without stopping. COVID starts, right?
Yeah.
John is supposed to have a show. So for senior thesis that year, we were able to accommodate each student having their own kind of mini pop-up show for like a week. Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, so John's show was supposed to open March 21st?
Yeah.
Something like that, of 2020. John gets all the work done, gets the entire thing done.
Yeah.
And can't put it up.
No, we were literally painting the gallery, because I wanted it to be.
Because John doesn't do anything halfway.
Yeah. But it was a specific shade of gray, so I was like, we were painting the gallery. I think at the time they were thinking about, maybe it's still gonna be open, and it was still set to go ahead.
Right.
And then we get an email at like 11 o'clock being like, everyone needs to leave. And
So anyway, I'm like the teacher, I'm trying to be like up and positive about the whole thing. Knowing that John has done just a massive amount of work, and I'm so proud of him, so happy for him. So I say, John, don't worry about your thesis show. You're gonna have really big shows, everything's gonna be fine. Here we are. So this feels really great because I was right. That you would have a big show and everything would be fine. It took 6 years. 5 years? 5 years.
No, 5 years.
That's a very small amount of time to go on.
Yeah, because like 2-3 of those was like in the pandemic. That was like the time warp, right?
When I think about you in the pandemic, I think about you with your like COVID mask on, running around to Home Depot with like a truck you bought because it had the right length in the back for transporting the work you needed to make. Like you're a person who gets a truck based on the size of your work, which I thought was important also to know. Okay, so you can start to understand a little bit about the John Shen. So I also want to talk about the day that you first walked in to Create Shadows. So John had made portraits of my family on Stratton. He was bringing them up from Providence and like very generously like bringing this work up so that I could see it, he would have a frame. So we're like out here somehow like doing that, and then I see Anne. And it was almost like kind of like clowns falling out of a car. How we ended up in here was suddenly John like showing Ing the work, which had not been the plan at all. Like, believe me, I wanted Ing to see his work, but I didn't think it was gonna be like exactly that day, exactly that way. But like, and there's like another show being installed, I believe. So suddenly we're right here, and John's showing her these portraits of me, and we're having like suddenly a studio visit in the middle of this space by accident. Like literally it felt like people falling out of a car. It was very weird. It was almost like the work had to be here. the work just like found its way into the space in a way that is so John Shen, where, you know, I say, John never stops working, and I don't see it as a flaw, but I'm amazed that you can keep the momentum going in that way. But it's almost like working in a way where momentum is not even relevant because the energy is just so ever expanding. Okay, so now we get to the actual first question. That was just like my background of like how I know John Shen and how he ended up in this space with this work, with this show in the first place. And so here we go. So, John, just for the people who have never seen this work before and might not understand what it is, can you unpack, like, what are we looking at? What are these pictures?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess this is, Afterimage is a show about me. It's a show about my family, the women in my life that I love. So it sort of ended up being about my mother, myself, my wife Haley, who's here in a lot of the images. And what you're seeing here is like, here, this is a project that has been going on for 4 years. It started in your class.
It started in senior thesis.
Yeah,
in your thesis, yeah. Yeah, because you were earlier making these like lenticular prints, like images of people behind screens, like thinking about windows, screens, like mediating an image in a way in which like the thinking or the process that changes the interpretation of it.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, John's like, comes in one day and he's like, I'm gonna make star camera pictures. I'm like, I don't know what that is, John, but it sounds really good. So then he takes the whole class to your apartment, which was a dark room, right?
Yeah.
So he converted his entire like apartment in Providence into a like dark room.
Yeah, converted the bathroom.
Yeah, and like like the whole, like it was a walking. You're in a camera. You're inside a camera.
Yeah.
So then
I'm really good at that now. I've done that many times. Too many times.
Yeah. So then we're in your camera, you show us how to make these pictures, but it's like, how did you even dream up the idea? Just unpack, like, how do you make a straw camera?
Yeah. So, all right, well, we'll come back to this, but the black and white photographs that you see here, they're all direct positive photographs, and they were all made on the stuff on the wall here with the contraption or the camera part of it that's hanging in the window over there. And that's comprised of about 28,000 just black drinking straws that we've all encountered, right? And that's it, there's no lens. The camera in its totality is actually just like that plus like a wooden board that sort of like swings in that holds the photographic paper, and that's it.
And you had to glue every straw.
Yes. It was a bit crazy, but for me, you know, conceptually it was important that there was no optical element between the subject and also the photographic paper. So we couldn't use perspex or acrylic or anything else to contain it. So everything had to be hand glued. It took about a year. But to sort of explain, I got the idea working. It was like, you know, I think 4 a.m. in the studio. I was actually working with photography strobes. And these are used, for those of you who are photographers, you'll probably be very familiar with these. But these are known as like photographic grids. I'm gonna pass some of these around. Can you pass some of those around? But I was like working with them, and you know, the way that these are tools that are meant to sort of shape the light that's coming out of the flash, right? And so if you don't want it to spread as much, you have something like this, which is like, I think, a very high degree angles, like this honeycomb structure. And as you're looking through it, you can see, as you know, we can sort of like look through each other, but then I turn it a little bit and you can't. And what it's doing is it's sort of only allowing light that's sort of very parallel to come through, right? And I was thinking, wait, it's kind of filtering out like this light and sort of directing it in this sort of line. I wonder if you can like make an image with this, you know? That's sort of where it came from in terms of this idea. And then I was doing research on it. I was like, is it possible you do a lot of preliminary research, and turns out that these guys at the Yale School of Art in 2006 had already started making and thinking about something similar. But Mike Farrell and Cliff Haynes, one of them sort of passed away and the other one retired. And so they sort of didn't continue on with this research. So I was like, how do I replicate it? How do I make it? Is that possible? So I was making like little small 8x10s, there's like a first prototype. And one day, sort of after a lot of trial and error, it worked. It made an image. I was playing around with photographic paper, and suddenly, like, this thing was able to make an image with nothing but.
And it's one-to-one.
It's a one-to-one, right? It's something called telecentric. I found out after the fact. So it reproduces subject one-to-one. So without going too much into it, basically that thing that you see in the window, that's made all of these images on the wall here, and there's no optics involved. There's no sort of shutter that's involved. It's just that thing where I put photographic paper and we pop the flash and all of this stuff happens from it.
And you need a lot of light, right? Because the ISO for paper is like
Oh yeah.
1.
Yeah. Sorry. It's like 1, and we're using direct positive paper. So this is why they come out as positives rather than negative.
Right.
Images. So it's like similar to evocative, who is like the forgotten, like the pioneer of photography, right? Like, because everyone knows about Louis Vuitton and Henry Fox Talbot. But yeah, so that's how these are made. We can talk a little bit about.
And so they're unique as well. They're unique.
They're all unique. They're similar to Polaroids. So you're making Polaroids. I mean, think about
We just made these like an hour ago.
Yeah.
John can't stop working.
Yeah. So that's what you're seeing there. And then to go back to this is a work where I'll do it. I'll switch over. So there's a video playing on it, but this television was on nonstop, did not turn off, with an image of my mother from before she had me for 4 years. So it was constantly on. This is a time lapse of about 1 year in the studio.
And it started in 2020. Right?
Yes. This is 2023 because the pandemic happened. We were in survival mode, so we couldn't do this sort of time lapse. But this is about 1 year of time lapse. I'm going to switch it over just so you can see. But after 4 years, basically a ghost image, an after image of my mother was burned and etched into the screen. So this has been a project about time, about memory, about image and the image object, and then thinking about like what does it mean to have an image of someone that you love on this screen, this object for so long that it etches an image. And then therefore, as a result, every single image that you play on this photographic sculpture or object also has a superimposed image. Yes.
I'm so glad you included this image of your studio in Providence. Couple of things. I think it is relevant that you made this in 2020 during the global pandemic, and that your mother was on the other side of the world from you.
Yeah, because I'm from
like,
New York.
no matter how old you are, like I'm a mom, no matter how old your kid gets, they're still your kid. And I think about like how powerful it is that your mother was watching you for 3 years during the pandemic when she was so far away from you in New Zealand.
Yeah, and there was no way for me to go back. They locked down
You
New
couldn't
Zealand.
travel.
No.
You were stuck where you were.
Yeah.
But also like the fact that she's watching you work for 3 years, like doing the thing that you love, right? Doing the thing that you love on the other side of the world. There's something profoundly powerful for me about that. And also that it was an image of your mother before she had you. So it's this idea of a woman before she became a mother.
Yeah, for sure.
But deeply mothering you through this video for 3 years.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And then she lives, as an after image forever on this monitor.
Yeah.
Right? It's incredibly powerful. It really is.
Thank you.
But I love that this is in here for people to see, and it's a time lapse of your studio, and you get to. And then when everything is off, she's still there.
Yeah.
Right? She's still there.
Yeah.
I visited you in the space, and I remember walking through, and you were like, "Oh yeah, that's that piece. It's like my mother burning on screen." And I'm like, I I just need to stand here for a minute and take this in because it's so quiet and it's so powerful. And I think maybe you lived with it for so long that it perhaps like it became mundane for you because you lived with it for so long in the way that a mother's love becomes mundane, but it's still so profound. So.
No, I think you're totally right. But the thing is, like, living with it for so long, it became so precious to me. One of the reasons why the project sort of came to an end was because, you know, she also had a little bit of a health scare in like 2023, but also I think there was a mirroring of this technology, like this object, because as the years went on, like the first year, second year, I was, you know, being like, okay, like it was an experiment to start off with, right? And then,
right, because you didn't know if it would work.
No. And sort of the first year, I would like occasionally just be like, you know, every month, would sort of like turn it off and be like, is anything happening? You know, and nothing happened. But as the years went on, I got anxiety about what if this thing breaks, and it became sort of like a metaphor for my own anxiety as my mother's getting older and having sort of like, you know, the health complications and scares that you do when you get older. I mean, she just turned 61, so
Mother's so young.
She's still so young, right? But she also works a lot. She's worked through businesses.
That's really good. I would also say, I also feel that there's a relationship to pregnancy and the idea that this piece took 3 years. That's a very long pregnancy. But the idea of it growing over time and checking on it and constantly hoping it's okay. And not even knowing how it's going to end, but being so in love with the hope and the possibility of the thing working out, right? So, lots of layers there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like we turned off the audio component, but after sort of this all concluded, I actually called my mom. I was like, can you record yourself singing the lullabies that you would sing to me when I was like 2 months old, 3 months old? Because the thing is, I didn't know, but she was telling me that when she just had me, my father was doing a fellowship in Shanghai. I was born in Shaoxing, which was like about, at the time it was like 3 or 4 hour like train ride. But he got a fellowship in Shanghai. And so was my mother alone in like a tiny, it was like a 10 square meter like room, like raising me by herself, singing me like lullabies to sleep, you know, for the first like 6, I think it was like the first year it was like that. And so I was like, can you sing these like things that you would sing to me? And she was like, okay. So there's an audio component that we shut off for the sake of the talk, but now there's also that other layer to think about. Like, I don't remember that. You know, I think very few people.
I remember like you played the singing from it at one point. I can't remember if it was in real life or I can't remember, but I know that I heard it. It's very powerful. I mean, I feel like maybe that's another part of this piece.
It is,
But you know, I've never heard you tell the story about the small room. And the room that you had the sort of first year of your life in. And now, of course, I'm going to make a connection between the camera in the room and how you've turned every home into a camera. So just something to think about there. And also the shape of the photographs that you're making is, you know, it has these heart corners. So as a psychoanalyst here.
And speaking of psychoanalysis, so once I realized that this image burn would superimpose anything that you played on this specific television, I was like, all right, what am I going to put on it? Like, what is the meaning behind it? And then that was when I encountered this thing. It's from the Harvard University Press, which is like down the road from here. This is known as a thematic apperception test.
Do you want to explain what that is?
Let me pull it out. So the thematic apperception test is a psychoanalytic tool that is not used anymore, but you know, during I think the 80s, 70s, very popular, and it became sort of like an evolution to the Rorschach test, which we'll come back to as well. But these were sort of, and I'm sorry, like I'm sorry, like if people are hoping to get one performed on them, because these are sets of figurative images that are deliberately ambiguous. And so as part of undergoing the test, you're given sort of like a selection of these images, which is playing on here. And you're asked to describe in as much sort of vivid detail what's going on. And then there's a sort of analysis performed on you based on the responses that you give. So, you know, what's going on here? Who are these people? What is their relationship? You know? And so that is what is playing on the television, because it was originally, the idea sort of began when I was thinking about CRT image burn, but I was also reading a lot of Carl Jung, which is like down here, the psychology of the unconscious. And Carl Jung talks about the idea of the imago, right? And then that also, it changes over time, sort of becomes what he calls the archetype. But the imago he describes as sort of this unconscious, like latent image that we all form. And primarily, it's actually an image, a mental image that you hold of your parents. And most of the time it's your mother, because it's in early infancy, the person that was looking over you, the face that you were looking at was your mother. And so that was sort of the genesis of like why all of this is connected, why my mother, why before she had me. Of course, like, you know, at the end of the day as well, like, you know, when Foucault's like Camera Lucida talks about the Winter Garden photograph. Well, the Winter Garden photograph, yeah, right, because I mean, like he uses to describe this idea of punctum, that's puncturing, because, you know, he discovers the Winter Garden photograph after the passing of his mother. And it's a photograph of her as a teenager, right? She's very young, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before she had him. And he describes in the book about being sort of like deeply sort of enraptured, and it's like puncturing to describe like the idea of punctum in this like photographic image. So that's what I was thinking about as well.
When you also went way after image.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, like in the book as well, like you can't find it. So after you're reading like Camera Lucida, that you have to like find the photograph. And what's interesting about the photograph is that it is a photographic object. Like it is a faded, old, vernacular photograph, and like that all adds to it.
I mean, the power of the vernacular maybe within a family and
Right.
sort of how we project our own experiences onto other people.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
So I have another question for you.
Sure.
So can you talk about the folded images?
Okay, yeah. I mean, to go back to the psychoanalysis, I mean, because to me, they sort of turned out as like photographic, to me, like Rorschachs. And in fact, that photograph there, which is an arrangement of flowers, if people are interested, it's lilies. It was sort of this magical moment after I like made it, that I was like getting psychoanalysis, and it's called The Dragon in the Night. And I don't know if everyone sees The Dragon in the Night. Maybe that's just me possibly lifting my marbles, but you know, there's definitely a dragon on the left-hand side, of like a dragon looking at you, and then the knight is like more close, in my mind, like a samurai knight with the like long, like large sort of crest over. Does everyone else see that, or is it just me?
I see the dragon.
Yeah, you see the dragon?
I also strangely see a plague doctor on the left.
A what?
A plague doctor.
A plague doctor, yeah.
So a plague doctor, dragon, a beak, but maybe that's part of the Rorschach.
Yeah, that is.
Rorschach.
Yeah.
I interpreted it that way.
Right.
But I also love the idea of these mimicking the Rorschach test as well.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what do you see? Or you see something you love.
Yeah.
Or you see somebody beautiful, or you see somebody who's lost, or you see somebody, like however you're going to
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And you know, these two portraits or images are images of Haley, my wife. She's such an amazing collaborator and partner to work with. But like this image was us sort of thinking and trying to make an image of the Roman god Janus. So I don't know if you know.
I love that you guys have these conversations where it's like, today you will be Janus.
Yeah.
And it's like just the answer is just like, okay, here we go. So something else I wanted to say, and I said this when I walked in. So I just saw the show today. I've been following on Instagram very excitedly, like weird art auntie, like watching along, you know. But I got to see the show in person today, and I said, hey, when I walked in, John has so much energy, but the work is so still. And it's like you never stop working and you never stop moving, but the work is so still.
Yeah.
And part of that, of course, is just like the fact of a photograph, right? The fact of a photograph on the wall in a frame. The fact of it is that it is still, right? But you as a person and an artist and a maker never stops moving. Like even this talk today, it's like, I can see that you have 5 other answers for every question I'm asking you, and I know that you're like bringing it together, you know? But I love the stillness in the work, and I feel like all of the sort of fission that goes into the process is so important because it makes the stillness more still. And even quieter. And even more patient.
I completely agree with that. You know, it's something that I don't think I'm in control of because it is sort of an aspect of what's happening, and that's why I think these portraits in the back here.
This is
you
and Haley.
Oh no, this is my mother.
This is your mother. Wait.
This is me.
Wait.
This is titled The Artist and His Mother.
Okay.
After Asha.
And then this one.
This one is just mother-in-law.
Oh, this is Haley and your mom.
Yeah.
And then this is you and your mom.
Yeah.
The whole wall is your mother.
Yeah, it is.
This shirt should be up during Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Is it not? It's not up during Mother's Day. We're like off by like a month. I don't know, is Mother's Day May? Every day is Mother's Day. Okay, I think we're up to question, maybe we have like 1.5 more questions.
Yeah.
How are we on time? We're good.
Half an hour.
Do we have like 10 more minutes? 15 more minutes.
We have
Okay.
15 minutes, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, and I think we've kind of talked about this, and so maybe you don't want to answer this question, but how does the process of making this work inform the physical fact of it living in the world, and is the process of it important? You kind of answered it, but if you have anything else you want to unpack, I'm just trying to say.
Right.
If you want.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the process is.
And also speak about failures, like anytime you really messed it up, and like something you learned from like, that process.
For sure. I mean, I think for me, like form creates meaning, and the process is deeply important because it all stems from like these ideas that then sort of like women take you on these journeys or like things that you could never have expected. And I think in terms of that failure where you're going to is like, well, how did I end up at these folded images? Because we haven't even talked about how they're even made, right? So these images are made when you fold the photographic paper emulsion to emulsion. So like it gets folded in on itself, and then it gets loaded into the camera because the back of the camera, the way it's loaded, is just literally held together with some tape. You tape the paper, you close the back, there's just a simple
It's basically a content print.
Yes, it's a content print. And that's how it's made. We had to dump, by the way, like 12 times around it. But the whole point about how we got to that, how we got to these like psychoanalytic Rorschach images was that we were making these photographs. And it was like 0% humidity because of the winter. And they started curling. And when you were loading them, they were dog-eared. And we were having a real issue with that. And then it was one of those things where we sort of realized or noticed that a little bit of light, just enough light, was getting through the back of the paper when it was dog-eared onto the emulsion that you could actually expose through it.
You can see it.
Yeah, exactly. And we were like, well, what if we actually just exploit it? What if we like just carried that thread along and actually started folding them? And then that sort of like unraveled into this own journey about, oh, that's where it's all coming together in terms of like, I was like Carl Jung and thematic apperception tests, and now these are essential Rorschachs, and then it was sort of like, oh yeah, I remember falling in love with Bruce Conner's drawings, because he made so many drawings that were just ink blots. They're like so beautiful. And
I mean, it's something we've discussed, like I came in today and I had never seen the really big ones, that are like 9 or 12 or 15 tiles.
Yeah.
And I asked John, like, why are you, I mean, I'm very excited about it, but I wanted to understand the moment where all of a sudden we were doing that. Like, okay, John, you're making grids now. Like, that is different. You used to be limited by the back of the camera, the one-to-one sort of contact print of the straw camera. And so maybe speak about the moment where all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah, I can go bigger.
Yeah. I think it was a desire because with this camera, quote unquote, it reproduces the subject one-to-one. It's life-size. And I'll say that next to this later on. But one of the problems with that is that we were making these sort of portraits, these sort of still lives, and we're like, okay, well, what if we want something a bit more larger than life? What if we want some sort of like narrative, right? We were thinking about like Roman and Greek frieze sculptures, like relief sculptures. But
you were also thinking about your in senior thesis when you made them together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Right. Full circle. And so the only way to do this is to make a life-size photograph. And so we have this huge, crazy contraption, because it's like, at the same time, simple, like this deadly simple thing, and then we have a contraption to sort of move the camera up in this sort of like perfect grid, like exactly up 20 inches, and then we'll move the subject, because there's like 30 strobe lights in the studio to sort of make this happen. Make the subject move it side to side by like 16 inches. So it's sort of like this one image, and then you reload and you like move it down, and then you're sort of like making this array scan in order to make these images. So there's like this huge platform I had to build for all of that. But then that was a situation where we were like putting them together, and the framing of it was just because of the fact that like it was sort of this aha like moment where I had always in the US lived in a place that had like older windows that were like these sort of tiles of smaller panes. I lived in an old mill building, like an older, in Providence as well. And then we went to like Mexico City, and that was at the moment where it's like in Mexico City, they actually have like entire doors, or like entire walls that go all the way down the floor with these wrought iron panel pieces. And we're like, oh, of course. Like now this work, like because it's life size, it transforms into a window. It transforms into a portal, if you will. I actually just found out that the term for these horizontal or vertical slides in windows, they're called mullions. Like I showed someone and they're like, oh yeah, the mullions on like on a window. I was like, I did not know.
Isn't it fun when all of a sudden you're part of something that's been going on for like thousands and thousands of years?
Yeah.
And you realize that you're a thumbs up for it too.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my last question is, so you started grad school at Yale this last fall. How's that going?
It's been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
This is only, I would say, a selection.
This is like 10% of the work you've made since September.
Yeah.
There's no production problem. No.
I don't think so. But like it's been kind of when you told me what the Yale experience was like, I was like, okay. And then I got there. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is like
it's next level.
It's next level because there's like 3 critiques, a semester. I mean, it was great. Like literally 2 weeks ago. Less than 2 weeks ago. I think about 10 days ago, I bought the camera and like all the lights. I turned because we call it the pool. The crypt room is a pool. It's underground.
It has no window. So it used to be like a YMCA. And for people who have been to Yale before, the main critique space for the photographers is a disused pool that was repurposed.
Yeah.
And so because Gregory Crutzen, who's the director of that program, is a big swimmer, he refers to the crit space as the pool.
Yeah.
So that's the best. Because we sound crazy.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, no, don't apologize. But it's like everyone like, what are you talking about, this pool? So,
right.
Anyway, we're at the pool. And so I was actually saying, is it possible that the work has expanded and scaled because the pool that you show at Yale is quite tall?
Yeah.
The walls are quite tall. And they're certainly taller than any other critique space you've probably ever critiqued.
Oh, yeah.
But you said no. But maybe.
Maybe it's going to get even bigger, yeah.
Right. And there's always, of course, like the problem and the greatness of like critiquing in a large space.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden the work seems really small.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that people who critique in that space and then making larger work.
Friends.
But in a way, I think it's been an incredible push for you.
Yeah, it is.
To push into this larger space.
Yeah,
so
great.
maybe that's great. Thanks for the pool.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I turned it into a dark room because it has no windows. And then
in your crit, you decided you would make a portrait of
Collier
Shore. No pressure.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah.
In front of your classmates.
Yeah.
Most people don't like to be watched while they make pictures.
Right.
But yeah, you did.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it was
And
great.
did you want to unpack that moment?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, damn, I wish, because, I think final review, like, Dawu Bay and,
Did Daryl pass?
No, well, I was trying to get them
I
to,
thought it would say her.
oh, 100%, but they didn't have time, and I was like, oh, well, I couldn't get them to come to my studio to make a picture, and I was like, what if I just turned the crit into that moment, and then,
It's a performance.
yeah, absolutely, and then, Carly was like, I'm down, and that's, the rest is history, so,
Right.
yeah.
I think you might be the only student at Yale to have ever made a picture live in your critique.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. But one of my like friends and fellow students, he did run over 30 miles for final critique. That was crazy.
He ran 30 miles.
He was on a treadmill. He had it live streamed. He started at like 5 a.m. He was running for like I think 6 or 7 hours, and then like by the end he clocked 30 miles. Like he planned it so that he was going to finish.
He's gonna finish during.
Yeah.
He's like it's a metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's the stuff that happened at Yale.
I think we're probably ready for questions.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hi, John, Laurel, thank you for this absolutely fascinating discussion. I was thinking about, Laurel, you mentioned the word stillness as something that pervades these images, and then we got to talking about scale. Lovely anecdote about the swimming pool, by the way. I'm looking at the great photos. I hesitate to call them photos, but what I'm kind of struck with is how they're obviously wall-based images, but they're kind of suspended in this state of indetermination. There's this blur, and they resist clarification, they resist clarity. And from where I'm sitting, it's kind of a blur, and I notice when I go up close, the cohesion of the image is going to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about what you were saying, John, at the beginning of your talk about the way that you're trying to make almost a direct image, and then toward the end you were also talking about reproduction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reproducing reality, and that's when you were talking about scale.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, the people in the image, they resist that reproduction. And I'm just wondering if this is something that you're exploring through your work, a kind of opacity, maybe, a kind of resisting that reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on there?
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I think it's a great question. I've been listening to a lot of David Lynch interviews. So I guess I'll reference David Lynch because I think he got a question about David, all of your movies, they're hard to follow sometimes, and they have that same sort of opacity. And I think he gives an answer where he talks about, I gotta leave room to dream in his work. And that's what I'm thinking about in relationship to abstraction as well. I mean, I think there's a lot of other stuff that we could sort of unpack for a very long time about abstraction, and there's so much to do with Hito Shiro, Walter Benjamin's On the Edge of Mechanical Reproduction. The thing I'm referencing is Hito Shiro's In Defense of the Poor Image. But for me, ultimately, it's about, alright, so I bought this. This is known as a tensegrity structure. And I'll pass it around, but this thing is it'll hold weight. I don't have anything to put on it, but yeah, we can pass it around. But I'm trying to bring it into the art lexicon because it's an engineering term. Because it's like tension and integrity, tensegrity. But the way that it sort of works is that it's using a simultaneous compression and tension in order to sort of hold this sort of structure up, and it looks like it's floating. And for me, what I want to try and achieve in a lot of my works is this sort of simultaneously pulling and pushing away. Because we haven't talked about the fact that these are all direct positives, and I go through a lot of annoying sort of
Where's the negative?
hidden.
Where's the negative? John?
There's no negative, right? And they're all these unique one-off objects, and it analog objects, but the straws and the way that they're made, everyone looks at them and is like, oh yeah, these are like digital images or like a low
They're
resolution.
super low DPI.
Yeah.
It's like when you were in school and you resized your image wrong, and then you go to your final credit with like something that is blurry.
Exactly.
But like on purpose.
Right, yeah.
I always think about the fact that you have to stand immediately in front of the subject to record the image with this camera, and that there's no, it must be placed directly in front of them. So it's like standing in front of a person having an experience. It's very one-to-one.
Yeah, exactly.
But then of course, because it is such a low DPI, only how many thousand?
It's 28,000, so if you're talking about megapixels, it's like 0.028.
Right. But it's like incredible labor that goes into making this dry camera to essentially have images that you could make with like a box camera, almost, right? But for me, that's about like incredible optimism and commitment, despite knowing people will then say, but it's like a little bit blurry. But that's kind of the point.
It's the point. And
there's a humbleness to
sure.
it, with incredible work that goes behind it, like such belief in the image.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that it's made as well, it's sort of like every time the photograph comes out, it's not a situation where you're like looking through the ground glass or looking through the viewfinder and you click and like what you see is what you get. It's always something that sort of, to me, sort of exceeds what I could have possibly imagined. But that's also why one of the reasons I brought the camera through, and you can actually see the tulips that's sitting behind the camera. If you go outside and you stand sort of like right where the benches are, that's one of the reasons why.
I love that that's there.
Yeah.
Because everyone's gonna get to have this moment where they see for themselves the magical thing.
100%, because like, you know, I remember the first time I showed you, it was the first time I showed a lot of people, they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean this was made with a straw, like camera? Like, you know, like, was it armature made? And then it was just, like, you just like made the like physical structure.
Remember you came in like at one point when you were a student, you said, my supplier for the straws is out and I don't have straws. I was like, Don, are you okay? What is going on here? And you were like, I need another X thousand of straws.
Yeah.
And then you made that whole camera and you were happy, so you did another one.
Yeah, because that was a prototype. And then like what happens is like, you know, I stumbled across this, but like photographically, because you know, you have to be so close to the camera, the flash pops, but it feels like, you know, like that.
Like your face has to be that close too.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been photographed by you.
Yeah.
And I will say I had moments of terror.
Yeah.
When I was being photographed, because the lights, the strobes are very strong.
Yeah, it is.
And you have to be, you know, in the dark, and your face has to be essentially touching the camera, right? And then there's this giant flash of light, and then there's one image. There's one image, that's it.
Yeah, no, I think in critique, like, I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to sort of get a magician's outfit for it. When I was like doing the light demo, I ran out of time.
That'd be amazing. And then like maybe for the front of the straw camera, like it opens. Like really like dramatically. And you do the exposure and then you close it. And then you like. You know,
right.
I think maybe for your next credit.
It is, could be.
Should we take more questions?
Yeah, for sure.
I have a very small technical question and a bigger conceptual question. In the folded prints, when you're flashing through the versa, do you have to double expose it?
Yeah, it's 12 times. It's like 12 times the amount of light. So like, you know, like we will turn it up full power and then like pop the flash like 6 times in order to get it.
With it open. With the front open.
No. So like it gets loaded in, folded, and then it stays folded, loaded, and then there's like 6 pops. I'm sort of counting down, and there's like I said, 30 strokes. It's like it's
a formula.
Huh?
It's a formula.
There's a formula, but yeah.
Here's my other question.
Sure.
I was like, you must have to expose it more. I'm interested in the mannerist quality of these because they are one-to-one, but they're also distorted. There's a distortion element that happens because of the grid, because of the million, you know, because of these breaks from the frame. Because the way that, you know, like certain parts of your body are closer to the whatever. And so there's a very mannerist quality and elongation that has a lot of also art historical
Yeah,
references.
for sure.
And I'm interested in how you're playing with this quality of both the direct reference, the index,
Yeah.
and the distortion.
Yeah.
And how you're factoring in qualities like this
Yes.
glitch in the straws
Yeah.
that then moves to the outer edges in the folded prints,
Yeah.
but repeats, becomes this kind of echo,
Yeah.
a gestural echo through these, because there's this crack that's formed,
Right.
or the gap,
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah.
that's formed, you know. I'm interested in how you're playing with the textural quality of what happens when you glue this many thousand straws together,
Yeah.
and what it does to the one-to-one image.
Right. Right. So you're right. That's such a great question. I think it was something that we didn't get
Even
to.
like talking about like the banding, because I remember you
Yeah.
were frustrated by the banding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but it's part of the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
This
It is.
is like
Yeah.
a-
But it also reminds me
This is
of
a gesture.
television.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like this era of television.
Oh yeah. Oh, when you try to film it and the band goes down. Absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is when I first made this after a year of doing this, because like otherwise I'd go insane. But and I made it, and there were these bands and these sort of artifacts in it. I hate it. Right now, I love it. It is deeply integral to the work because for me, the work it almost feels like a fingerprint, right? Like conceptually, if you go, oh yeah, if I were to make another one, somebody else makes another one, like in terms of provenance or whatever it is, it's like you'll never make an exact camera like that again. Like in terms of that. And then these elements that happen also mean that there's an unpredictability in the image when I'm making it, and that's all part of this sort of like, you know, that tensegrity structure that's going around, that I'm trying to have this dance with creating the sort of studium that Foucault talks about, like in terms of making the image, but then all of these other serendipitous moments have to happen. I don't know if that answers your question about like the mannerist qualities of it and the fact that I'm not always like fully in control of that image that is being made.
It begins to.
Does that? Okay, it's good. It's good. And yeah, and then there's all these other things that happen when they like start solarizing as well, and that's just from sort of like an exposure issue.
Because you're shooting in your apartment.
Yeah.
And it's not completely light tight, actually. It's mostly light tight.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, something else I think about is this idea that now so many photographers, there's like this joke that like every photographer was using like the Canon 5D Mark II at a certain point in like 2010,
Yeah.
2005 to 2010.
That was like my first camera.
Yeah, I mean, I had a camera, you know, it's like, and it's a great camera, it's still a great camera,
Yeah.
you know, but there's something that started to happen when everyone was shooting on the same camera.
Yeah.
And we talk about like the voice of the camera, the voice of the
Yeah,
camera.
absolutely.
You know. And this camera has like a really specific voice,
Yeah.
and it was like built by the artist. And, you know, there's not many people who build their own cameras.
Yeah.
And when they do, frequently, mostly, they're trying to make them perfect.
Yeah.
And I think, even if your intention going into this was to make it perfect, whatever idea of perfect
Yeah.
was, the imperfection is actually the beautiful thing.
Absolutely,
And the voice
yeah.
of this camera is so unique.
Yeah.
In a time when 99% of photographers are working with a very fancy camera that is not special.
Yeah, and it's
And
so.
these are so special.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. It's like thinking about the indexicality of image. I feel like there's also a fetishization of like resolution and image
I think
quality.
we've talked about this too.
Yeah.
Like the idea, you know, I remember there was this moment, I think it was when I was in school. It was like, when I was in the Yale panel, like maybe 5 years after I graduated, and everybody was using these like digital cameras. I remember Todd Havergeorge said, every image looks the same on this wall because every image was made by a camera that ultimately controlled how this image would appear.
Right.
And that's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
And I think it remains to be a problem, not for you, but I see, in a way, I don't know if you were reacting against that problem, or if it's just like the John Shen-ness of it, and you ended up in this other zip code.
Yeah.
But for me, because I've taught a lot of people, it's really satisfying to see someone who's in control of the images that they're making and not held back by the limitations of technology that they're not making.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean,
That's not it's like a statement, I don't know, yeah, but go ahead.
No, I mean, so my dad was a chemist. Like, we moved to New Zealand because he was gonna he did his PhD in chemistry. And so I see the practice and the work as like a long line of experiments. Like, this was an experiment. It's like, what happens if I have the same image on a TV for 4 years? Or maybe 10 years, or however long? What happens if I try to make like an image with a straw? And then from that, all this other stuff comes from it.
We just can't escape it, can we?
No.
All right, maybe one more question, or one or two? One more.
I just want to say one thing, and it's not really a question, but because you introduced this piece with your mother and the 4-year imprint of the afterimage of her face, I have like increasing anxiety as we sit and other images are playing, because I feel like her image is going to be diluted by things that aren't 100%. Her. So I'm wondering about how you're going to take care of this, you know, this work that is really a machine. That is so, you know, such a miracle, like a Jesus, like Shroud of Turin kind of thing that happened. So.
No, you're totally right, because I had thought about like, look, because there's an A/B that at night I would have that image sort of like reburn at night to sort of maintain this after image of my mother. And then, you know, I think in a studio visit, I forget who with, I think it was Ocean Ron. Ocean Ron sort of came over to the studio, it was amazing. And he was like, oh no, it's poetic. It's poetic because now with you playing on the image, over time, your image is going to burn in and burn over your mother's image. And I think it's sort of like the way that our lives go. You know, like there's such, our parents, you know, our mothers are such a huge influence on us. Like earlier on, they have such an imprint. But as we get older, or as I get older, and you know, maybe I'll have like kids of my own as well, then that becomes sort of the same kind of authorship. So over time, that like my mother's like after image will slowly begin to be replaced by my after image, and that will be sort of this melding. So that's sort of where I'm at now with it, in terms of like living with it as a sort of object that will just have these other images slowly burn into it over time. There will be the sort of abstraction where it's like she's not as legible as you can see now with the thematic apperception test. And I don't know, like, because like I could, you know, decide to
You could just pause and say like, this is done, and then we do another one. And
oh, I have one.
There's a lot of mothers
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were just thinking about a lot of us, like after making this work, we're like, you know, we could start a business where we would come in and record mothers, like young, like recent mothers singing their lullabies, and then, you know, 20 years, like when their kids are like grown and like have all of this, and what, like, you know what I mean, like that gets given to you, and you sort of like hear it, and then like I don't know if we were like sort of unlocked. It was like this one sort of like moment where just like, you know, because I don't remember like
there's these like teddy bears where you can do.
Yeah.
Do you know the teddy bears where you record?
You record the messages.
Yeah, and then they have the teddy bear. Or like a storybook, reading a favorite book.
Is that the next program? Should we collaborate?
But I like your idea of like, we're just gonna like admit it's gonna hurt later. So we're just gonna set you up with this time capsule knowing like you need this.
Yeah.
You need this.
Yeah.
Do you have any, no, okay.
No, do I?
Thank you all for being
Yeah.
here.